So the first thing to do is go to this web page. It's spelled Piskel, or if you want to go straight there, you can go to Piskel app, piskelapp.com. If you made it to here, then you're in the right spot. Now before you go any further, if you haven't created an account, you should. Or if you have, go ahead and sign in. One of the best things about Piskel is that it's completely free, so you don't have anything to worry about when creating an account here. Now, there's another video coming up after this one where I'm going to give you a full tutorial on how to create an explosion, which is a very specific animation inside of Piskel. But in that one, I don't spend a lot of time explaining each tool, so this video is going to be about each tool, how it works, and just how to get started and set up in Piskel. Whereas the next video will walk you through a step-by-step process of how to make a specific animation. So let's look at our most basic tool that we're already started on, the pen tool. When I use the pen tool, I draw exactly 1 pixel worth of paint. Simple enough. You can also change how big this tool is by using these blocks right up here. So if you need to work a little bit faster or color a bigger area, you can turn it up to 2 pixels by 2 pixels, or 3 pixels by 3 pixels, or the largest, 4 pixels by 4 pixels. And like with almost every program, Command-Z is undo, which will come in handy when you're experimenting and learning. Now before we go any further with any of the other tools, let's look at some of the settings over here on the right-hand side. For example, I can go to Resize. Now if while I'm painting this just doesn't feel like enough room to get the job done, or if it feels like my sprite just won't have as much detail as I wish it could, then I'll probably want to go and resize my entire canvas, my drawing area, so that I'll have more room and potentially more detail. So this is the resize tool right here. By default, we start with a 32 pixel by 32 pixel image, but let's just pump that up to 100 by 100 and click resize. And now when I paint with a single pixel, you'll see that there's a lot more potential for detail here. So it's up to you how many pixels you have in your image and how detailed you want to get. If you want to keep things simple, there's nothing wrong with a really classic 32 by 32 pixel image. If you use the pixels well, you can make something really cool. But if you want it to feel a little bit more like regular drawing that's just a little bit pixelated, then you can make your image a little bit bigger. It's always a good idea to save frequently. If you're logged in, saving to your gallery is really easy and you'll always be able to get back to your work online no matter what computer you're at. If for some reason you didn't log in, or you find yourself unable to save online, you can always save offline as a .piskel and you can import this later. But I only recommend that as a last resort, or if you want to back your files up somewhere. So now we know how to resize our canvas and save our work, let's look at some of these other tools. To the right of pen, we have a vertical mirror tool, which is really useful if you want to do something that's symmetrical, the same on the left and the right. So if I was making a butterfly sprite, this would be a pretty handy-dandy tool, or any number of things that are symmetrical. But a butterfly is a good example. Now there's a couple of variations on how you can use this tool. If we hover on it, it tells us that if we hold Command, it will use the horizontal axis. It means that instead of being the same from left to right, it would be the same from top to bottom. And if we shift-click while using this, then it will be the same from left to right and top to bottom. So we'll be drawing in all 4 corners, essentially. So a very handy tool if you're trying to create something symmetrical. Don't waste your time trying to draw it perfectly on the left and the right. Just draw it once and let the tool do the rest of the work. Next, we'll look at our bucket fill, which is a very easy, if I draw a shape and I want to paint it in, it would be a waste of time to try to paint it in by hand. So we use the bucket fill tool. And while we're at it, since we're looking at painting in colors, we can come down here to our color picker. We can pick the big idea of the color on the right, and then pick the tone or the shade of that color in the big box on the left. And now, I can switch colors very easily. There's also this handy tool down here, which shows us our current colors. So if you want to keep your color palette the same, like you want to use the same shades of green and red, so then every color that you use will be saved down here. So if you're going back and forth and painting from one to the next, it'll be very easy for you to get those colors when you need them. Also, right above your color chooser is the eyedropper color picker tool, where if you did need to pick a different color that's not on your palettes for some reason, you could come down here and use this tool as well. Now to the right of the bucket tool is the Paint All Pixels. So if I were to use this, and let's say I wanted all of my red pixels to become green, Even though these red pixels aren't attached and the regular bucket fill wouldn't connect them, this bucket fill will. So if I wanted to make this a solid green circle again and get rid of this red, that would be a very quick way to do it. The next tool is very easy to understand. It's the eraser tool. And just like your pencil tool, you can use the size picker up here to determine how much you're erasing all at once. Next is the stroke tool. The stroke tool can also be adjusted in terms of how big or small it is, but this will help you with drawing straight lines or angled lines, which can sometimes be a little bit tricky in pixel art, but this tool makes it very easy. So if you need lines, the stroke tool is the way to do it. The next couple tools are also fairly self-explanatory. We have a rectangle tool, and if we want it to be a perfect square tool, all we need to do is hold Shift, and then we get a perfect square. We also have a circle tool, which will create ovals most of the time, unless we hold down Shift, and then it will create perfect circles for us. Next, we have what looks like a hand. This is our move tool. Using our hand tool, we can move our whole image. This is mostly useful if you have a large image and you can't fit it all on screen at once, but it's there if you need it. Next, we have this magic wand tool, which is good for selecting shapes. So just selecting a shape on its own doesn't do much. But if I were to use Command C to copy it, then I could paste this shape somewhere else. Or after selecting it, I could Command X to cut it, and then paste it somewhere else. Now, aside from the magic wand that selects an entire shape, I could also select just a portion of a shape using my rectangle tool. And again, making the selection on its own doesn't do much. But if I use Command X, I can cut it, Command V, I can paste it, or again, I can make a selection and copy, and then paste it wherever I want. The same is true with the lasso tool. It just allows you to select areas that are a little bit more organic and complex than the regular rectangular select tool would allow. Now for our next tool, let me do a little example. Let's say I want to create a sprite for a ball. I'm going to create a red ball. I'm going to start with my circle tool set to 1 pixel. I'm going to shift click and make a big red circle. Then I'll fill this in with my bucket tool and that same red. I've got a big red circle, but I want this to look like a ball, not a circle. It has to be 2D. How am I going to make this appear 3-dimensional? Well, I can use the Lighten and Darken tool down here. Normally by just selecting this and then painting somewhere over here, we'll begin lightening whatever colors we're painting on. So if I lighten this really intensely right here, this looks like a little bit of glare or reflection on this ball. Make it a little bit bigger and move a little quicker as I get further out, because the longer you hold this in one place, the more that it will lighten that area. Now if this is my highlighted area, I also want to make a darker area where it would be shadow. So it tells me right down here, if I hover on the tool, that if I command click, I will darken an area. So let's darken the area that's furthest away from our light source. And you can see if I hold still too long in one place, I get an outright black color, which might be a little bit too dark depending on how much light is in my picture here. But you can see how this is kind of a useful effect. And in areas where it gets too dark, I could go back and lighten it up. Or what I'd probably use this for is a way to get some good example colors. And I might actually just end up going to the color picker and painting in with some of the shades that my lighten and darken help me discover. So that way I can pick fewer colors by hand and still come up with colors that would realistically be on my shape if I was imagining that there was a light source and I was trying to shade this. So this is far from perfect, but you get the idea. You can use lighten and darken to help you create shades and tones, and then you can use those shades and tones however you need to make your image look a little more 3-dimensional and apply the idea of lighting. Alright, the last tool that we haven't used yet is the dithering tool. What the dithering tool does is it applies 2 colors at the same time. It'll apply your foreground color and the background color. So let me pick a couple different shades. I'll take my light red and one of my darker reds. And if I use this with my dithering tool, you'll see it basically creates a checkerboard pattern. This has some pretty specific uses, so you may not use it all the time, but if you're trying to create a pattern, it certainly can come in handy. So those are all of our basic tools, but now let's take a quick look at how Piskel is really helpful at helping us make an animation. I'm going to keep this quick and not very pretty, but just the world's simplest example of how Piskel can help us create animations. I'm going to create a very, very simple character here. Not one that I'll be entirely proud of, but here it is. I'm going to make a stick figure, using my circle tool for the head, my stroke tool for the body and legs and arms, and here's my person. You'll notice that whatever I draw in my main window here also shows up in this smaller window in the top right. If you want to get a clearer look at it, you can go to this preview option, and I can set this to be at 2 times so that I can see it a little bit larger up here. This little slider down here shows me 12 FPS. That means 12 frames per second. So it's showing me my animation at 12 frames per second. But when you only have 1 frame, you really don't have an animation. So in just a second, we'll create a second frame and see what an animation looks like. First, I'm going to give this guy a quick yellow head, and an eye, and a smiley face. Alright, now this guy looks great. So let's start animating. So to animate, we need more than 1 frame. You could click the Add New Frame button and start creating him from scratch and moving him around a little bit, but the far easier solution is to hover on the frame you already have and click on this little icon in the bottom right-hand corner of it that says Duplicate this frame. So now I have 2 frames, and my animation is technically playing, but both frames are identical, so nothing appears to be happening. Let's go and start making some changes. Let's say I want him to blink. I'll take this yellow color, and I'll start painting away the top of his eye. Now if you look closely here, you can see that our animation is starting to change. It's a little quick, so I'll slow this down for now. Now I'll duplicate my newest frame, and I'll just paint yellow over another little layer of his eye there. Duplicate the frame again, and 1 row at a time. I'm getting rid of the eye to create this little blink animation. Now you can see that his eye kind of snaps back open again. So I'm pretty happy with the downward blink, but then it just repeats to frame number 1. We get frames 1 through 6, where his eye goes from wide open and then slowly closes. But then it just loops and goes back to the top. So now what I want to do is duplicate these frames and then adjust where they show up in the order so that his eye will slowly reopen instead of snapping back open. So there it is, a very simple example of an animation, but an animation nonetheless. So go ahead and watch the next video, and now that you've seen how to use all of the tools, you can have some fun animating something a little more exciting. Alright, good luck!